I want you to do something for me, just for a second. I want you to clear your mind and think about a single word.
Mhm.
It's a word that sits right at the center of pretty much every single human interaction you have ever had.
Yeah.
From the second you wake up and look at your alarm clock to the moment you go to sleep. We use it constantly. I mean, we talk about people being on a power trip. We
Right.
talk about power lunches. We talk about nations being superpowers.
It is basically the currency of politics.
Mm-hmm.
It is the engine of the economy, and frankly, it is the invisible undercurrent of every argument you have ever had with a spouse or a parent or a roommate.
Exactly. The word is power. And here's the thing, and this is what really struck me going through the massive stack of research we have for today's deep dive. We use this word every single day.
Uh-huh.
I use it, you use it, the news anchors use it.
Everybody uses it.
But I'm starting to realize we might not actually know what we're talking about.
That is actually a very common realization when you start digging into the literature. It is one of those concepts that feels incredibly intuitive until you try to pin it down with a definition.
Right.
Because you have to ask, is it a possession?
Hmm?
Like, is it like a loaded gun that you keep in a drawer and just take out when you need it?
Yeah.
Or is it a relationship? Or is it something even spookier, like a structural force that exists whether we want it to or not?
And that is our mission today. We are going to move way beyond the dictionary definition. We're going to unpack the actual physics of how power works.
And nuts and bolts.
Exactly. And we're going fairly wide here. We're going to look at everything from the interpersonal dynamics of a romantic relationship all the way up to the nuclear standoffs between nations.
Because surprisingly, the mechanics described in the sources are almost exactly the same.
They really are. Whether you are looking at a marriage or the Cold War, the underlying architecture of control relies on the exact same levers.
Dependency, alternatives, and agenda setting.
Yeah.
It's fractal. The pattern repeats at every single scale.
I have to admit, when we started this, I thought power was just, who's in charge.
Right. The guy with the biggest stick.
The boss, the president, yeah. But the reading we have today, from Bertrand Russell to Michel Foucault and C. Wright Mills, it completely blew my mind. It's just so much more slippery than that.
It is. And if we do this right, we're going to treat this deep dive like an excavation.
I like that.
We're going to start at the surface level, which is coercion. The stuff you can see. The boot stamping on a human face.
Right.
And then we are going to dig down into the hidden layers, the stuff you don't see. Agenda setting, thought control, and the structures that shape reality itself.
So let's jump right into the deep end. Segment 1, defining the indefinable, or as I like to call it, the absolute mess we're in.
It is a mess.
Because the sources, particularly the Encyclopedia of Philosophy, highlight that the language here is a total disaster.
In casual conversation, we use words like power, influence, control, domination, and authority interchangeably.
Right.
We just throw them around like confetti. But in political theory and sociology, those are distinct species. You wouldn't call a cat a dog just because they both have 4 legs.
Right.
Same thing here.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The source material gave this really specific, kind of funny example to illustrate the confusion. It's the careless smoker analogy.
Yes.
Walk us through that, because I think it exposes the first real crack in our understanding of what power actually is.
Right. So this comes from the debates on intention. Imagine a man is walking down the street. He is a careless smoker. He finishes his cigarette and just tosses the lit butt into a dry hedge.
Okay.
He keeps walking, completely oblivious, whistling a tune. The hedge catches fire, the fire sprints to a house, and the house burns to the ground.
Ow.
Now pause there. That smoker caused a massive effect. He created a huge disturbance in the world. He destroyed property. He mobilized the fire department. But did he exercise power?
My gut says no. I mean, he's just an idiot.
Right.
He didn't mean to burn the house down. It's a tragedy, sure, but it feels wrong to call him powerful. He's just clumsy.
Exactly. And that is where Bertrand Russell comes in. Russell is one of the heavyweights in this field, and he defined power specifically as the production of intended effects.
Intended effects.
Intention is the key for him. If you do something by accident, even if it changes the entire world, it's not power, it's just causality. It's physics.
Okay.
But here is the rub. Not everyone agrees with Russell on that.
Because if you look at the consequences, I mean, the house is still burned down.
Yeah.
The family is still homeless. From their perspective, that smoker had the power to destroy their lives.
Right.
Does the victim really care about the intention of the agent?
Precisely. And that ambiguity leads us to Robert Dahl. Robert Dahl is a giant in political science. You'll hear his name a lot today.
For sure.
He shifts the focus from effects to behavior. His definition is probably the most famous one in the whole stack, because A has power over B to the extent that A can get B to do something that B would not otherwise do.
Okay, so that's the change of behavior metric.
Yes.
It's very transactional. If I tell you to jump and you were going to sit and then you jump, I have power.
Correct. But notice what's missing there? Intention matters less than the actual outcome of compliance.
Right.
But then, to complicate things even further, you have Max Weber, the German sociologist.
Yeah.
He adds another flavor, conflict.
Conflict?
Weber defines power as the probability of carrying out one's own will despite resistance.
Despite resistance. That's a really crucial addition.
It is. Because for Weber, if there is no pushback, if there's no conflict at all, are we really seeing power? Or are we just seeing cooperation?
Oh, I see.
If I ask you to pass the salt, and you pass the salt because you're a nice person, did I exercise power over you?
Probably not.
Weber might say no. But if you hate me, and you explicitly refuse, and I somehow force you to pass the salt, now we are in the realm of power.
That seems like a really high bar, though. If I have to fight you every single time I want something, that suggests my power is actually kind of weak, doesn't it?
That is a brilliant point.
Like, if I was truly powerful, wouldn't you just do it without complaining?
It absolutely anticipates where we are going later with ideological power.
Mm-hmm.
But in the classical definition, resistance is the test. It's the stress test that proves power even exists.
This brings up a distinction that really helped me visualize all this. The difference between power to and power over.
Yes, this is crucial. Power to is a capacity. It's an ability.
Okay.
The source material uses the example of a tenor singer who has the power to smash a glass with a high C. That is a capacity.
Right.
He doesn't need to dominate anyone to do it. He just has the ability. It resides within him. It's skill, it's talent, it's competence.
Right. But power over is relational.
Exactly.
It's about control over another person. You can't have power over in a vacuum. You need a subject.
Yes.
And this is where it gets really interesting because the sources mention this idea of potentiality.
That is the idea that power is like a resource. You can have it without using it.
Like money in the bank. I don't have to spend it to be rich.
Or a weapon. Consider a police officer. A police officer has a gun on their hip. They might stand on a corner for 8 hours and never unholster it, never speak a single command.
But do they have power?
Absolutely. The potential to act changes the environment. People walk differently around them. They drive slower. It is a latent resource.
So power isn't just the explosion. It's the bomb sitting in the basement.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's the shadow the bomb casts. And that leads to the biggest debate in the field. Is power a zero-sum game?
Meaning if I get more power, you necessarily have less. Like a pie chart.
Right. That is the conflict view. Machiavelli, Weber, they see power as domination. It's a fixed pie. If I win, you lose. If I dominate you, I have taken your autonomy.
Okay.
But there's a totally different school of thought, represented by people like Talcott Parsons and Hannah Arendt. They argue for a public good view.
This is the power with idea, right? Which sounds a lot nicer.
It is much nicer. Arendt argues that power is the ability of a group to act in concert. If we all band together to build a barn or pass a law or overthrow a dictator, we have created power out of nothing.
We didn't take it from anyone.
Exactly. We generated it through cooperation. So in that sense, the pie actually gets bigger.
That's a much more optimistic view. But I have to be honest, looking at the rest of the research stack, the sources suggest that when we are talking about control, which is our focus today, we usually drift back toward that zero-sum, conflict-heavy definition.
We do, because while power with is great for building barns, power over is what determines who owns the barn.
Oof, yeah.
And that leads us perfectly into the framework that structures most of this discussion.
Yeah.
Because for a long time, people thought power was just that visible conflict of fighting B and winning.
Right.
But in the 1970s, a theorist named Stephen Lukes came along and said, no, you are missing the point. Power has three faces.
This was the aha moment for me. The three faces of power. It sounds like a bad horror movie, but it's actually a brilliant way to understand how society works. So let's break these down. Segment 2.
Let's do it. This is the core engine of our whole discussion.
Face number 1. This is the visible face. This is what we were just talking about with Robert Dahl.
Right. This is the decision-making face. To understand this, you have to look at what Dahl actually did. He went to New Haven, Connecticut, and he wanted to answer a simple question. Who governs?
Who actually runs the town?
Is it the mayor?
Yeah.
The rich families?
Yeah.
The unions? So he looked at concrete decisions.
Yeah.
A school board vote, a congressional bill, a renovation project.
He was looking for the fight.
Exactly. He looked for instances where there was a clear conflict. Side A wants X, side B wants Y. They fight, side A wins. We can see it, we can measure it. It's completely empirical.
It's like a boxing match. There's a winner and a loser. And Dahl concluded that because different groups won different fights, sometimes the teachers won, sometimes the parents won, sometimes the business owners won, that power was distributed. He called it pluralism.
Correct. And for a long time, political scientists thought this was the whole story. If you couldn't see a conflict, there was no power being exercised. If nobody is complaining, everybody must be happy, right?
But that feels so naive. It implies that if I don't speak up, I must agree with you. But maybe I don't speak up because I'm terrified.
It is naive. And that's where Peter Bachrach and Morton Baratz come in. They looked at Dahl's work and said, hold on a second. You are only looking at the fights that happen. What about the fights that never happen?
This is the second face of power, agenda setting.
Right. Bachrach and Baratz argued that power isn't just about winning the vote. It's about deciding what gets voted on in the first place. They call it the mobilization of bias.
The mobilization of bias. I love that phrase. It sounds almost military.
It's incredibly powerful. It means organizing the system so that certain issues are organized out. Let's make this concrete.
Yeah, let's do an example.
Imagine I'm the CEO of a company, and I know you want to talk about raising wages. Now, phase one power would be you bring up wages in the meeting, we argue, I yell at you, and I vote you down. That's phase one.
Right. I lose the fight visibly. Everyone in the room sees I lost.
But phase two is smarter. Phase two means I make sure the topic of wages never makes it onto the meeting agenda to begin with. Maybe I create a rule that says financial matters are only discussed in Q4. Maybe I bury your request in a committee that never actually meets. Maybe I distract you with a new wellness program so you forget about the money.
I keep it off the table. I suffocate the issue before it even breathes.
Exactly. So if an observer, like Robert Dahl, looks at that meeting, what do they see?
No conflict.
They see no conflict. They think, oh, everyone agrees on the wages because nobody brought it up. But they don't agree. The conflict was suppressed before it could become visible. That is the second phase, non-decision making.
That is really insidious because it creates the illusion of consensus. It reminds me of local politics, how zoning laws prevent affordable housing from ever even being proposed. It's not that the town votes no, it's that the vote literally never happened.
Precisely. And Bachrach and Baratz would say that is where the real power lies. Not in the vote, but in the agenda.
But then we get to the third phase, and this is the one that felt like the Matrix to me. This is Stephen Luke's.
Luke takes it one step further. He looks at phase one, action, and phase two, agenda. And he asks a really disturbing question. What if A can exercise power over B, not by forcing them to do something, and not just by keeping issues off the table, but by shaping B's very desires?
Ideological power.
Yes. If I can manipulate your thoughts, your wants, and your needs so that you want what I want, I never have to use force.
Never.
I never even have to suppress an agenda, because you will happily do exactly what serves my interests, believing it serves yours.
This is the ultimate form of control. It's completely invisible. The example the sources gave was the advertising industry.
Perfect example.
They create a desire for a product you don't need. You work hard to buy it. You feel happy when you get it. But who is really pulling the strings?
Or consider a benevolent dictator or a malevolent one whose subjects are happy because they literally don't know any better. They have absorbed the ideology of the ruler. Luce calls this the manipulation of real interests.
But this gets tricky, doesn't it? I want to push back on this a bit. Because who are we, or who is Stephen Luke's, to tell someone, hey, you think you're happy, but you're actually oppressed? Isn't that incredibly arrogant?
You have hit on the big philosophical critique of the third phase. It assumes that there is such a thing as objective or real interests that exist, regardless of what the person actually feels.
Right.
It can be very patronizing to say, you are suffering from false consciousness. It sounds elitist. It's the academic saying, I know what you need better than you do.
Yeah, if I love buying that expensive car and it makes me genuinely happy, why is that power? Why isn't that just my preference?
That is the defense. But Luke's argues that if we don't look at this, if we don't look at how information, education, and propaganda shape our minds, we are missing the most effective form of power in existence.
Wow.
If the slave loves the master, is he free? Luke would say no. He is under the deepest form of power because he cannot even imagine freedom.
So if phase one is a fist fight,
And phase two is locking the door so the opponent can't even enter the ring.
Phase 3 is convincing the opponent that he actually hates boxing and would rather sit quietly in the corner.
That is a perfect analogy. And if you look at modern society, phase 3 is everywhere. It's in our news feeds, our education systems, our cultural norms. It defines what we think is even possible.
So this naturally leads to the question, who is doing this? Who is holding this power? Is it just random, or are there people behind the curtain? Which brings us to segment 3, the structures of power.
The who runs the world segment.
Right. And we have to talk about C. Wright Mills. His book, The Power Elite, is a classic.
It is. Mills was writing in the 1950s, but his analysis feels incredibly modern. He challenged the idea, that pluralist view we mentioned earlier, that power in America was scattered among many groups.
Unions, voters, lobbyists, all balancing each other out.
Yeah, the idea that the people ultimately decide. Mills said that's nonsense.
He argued that the real decisions, the ones that involve life and death, war and peace, boom and bust, are made by a tiny triangle of elites, the power elite.
The triangle, let's break that down. Who are they?
The sources outline 3 interlocking domains. First, the military. Second, large corporations, so the economy.
Yeah.
And third, the political directorate, which is the executive branch of government.
And his argument wasn't that they're conspiring in the smoke-filled room, or that's not the Illuminati. They aren't wearing robes and chanting.
No, and that's a really crucial distinction for the listener. The sources make it clear it is not a conspiracy, it is sociology. Mills argued that these people form a single social class. They go to the same prep schools, they join the same country clubs, they act and think alike, and most importantly, they swap jobs.
The revolving door.
Exactly. A general retires and becomes a CEO of a defense contractor. A CEO becomes a cabinet secretary. They are circulating elites.
And because they circulate, they naturally homogenize their viewpoints. They don't need to conspire because they already agree on what is good for the country, because they all come from the exact same world.
It's a closed loop. So Mills argued that the middle levels of power, like Congress, local mayors, interest groups, that's all a distraction. That's a stalemate. The real history-making decisions happen at the top of the triangle, completely unchecked.
Correct. The voters are just watching a puppet show while the real action happens backstage. The middle levels fight over scraps while the elite decide the menu. Now, Mills is one perspective, but the sources also brought up a really dense but fascinating debate from the Marxist side of things. The Miliband versus Poulantzas debate. And I want to get into this because it asks, does the person matter or does the system matter? Oh, yes. The clash of the titans in the 1970s. It sounds academic, but the core question is vital. Ralph Miliband was closer to Mills. He said, the state serves the rich because the people in charge are rich.
Right.
They are the bourgeoisie. If you change the people, if you put workers in charge, the state would change.
Okay, so that's the personnel is policy argument. If we just elect the right guy, everything fixes itself.
Right. But Nikos Poulantzas completely disagreed. He took a structuralist view. He said the state is a capitalist machine. It doesn't matter if you put a saint or a socialist in charge. The structure of the system forces them to serve capital.
How so? Can you give me an analogy?
Think of it like a car designed to go 200 miles per hour. It doesn't matter if a grandma is driving it or a professional race car driver. The car has constraints and capabilities built into its engineering. Or think of a CEO. A CEO might be a wonderful, nice person, but the structure of the corporation forces them to maximize profit. If they don't, the stock drops and they get fired.
So Poulantzas argued that if a political leader tries to go against the market, the economy crashes, investment flees, and they get kicked out. So the structure dictates the power, not the individual.
Exactly. The individual is interchangeable.
That is terrifying in a way. It implies we are all just cogs. Even the president is just a cog.
It does minimize human agency. It suggests that the power elite aren't actually powerful. They are just the servants of the system.
But then if you want to get really radical about structure, you have to turn to the French philosopher Michel Foucault. I feel like every conversation about power eventually ends up at Foucault.
It has to. Foucault changes everything. Before Foucault, everyone, Mills, Dahl, Weber, they thought of power as something you hold, like a king on a throne or the elite in the boardroom, top down.
And Foucault says
power isn't a thing you hold. It's a network. It's everywhere. He says it flows through the capillaries of society. It's in the schools, the hospitals, the prisons, the families.
this is the concept of power and knowledge, right?
Yes. Foucault argues that truth isn't objective. Truth is produced by power. Think about a psychiatrist in the 19th century. They have the power to classify someone as sane or insane.
Right, they have the clipboard, they have the authority.
And that classification changes that person's entire reality. It strips them of rights, it medicates them, it locks them up. That isn't just a king saying off with his head. That is a system of knowledge defining who you are. The power lies in the definition itself.
And the sources mention this idea of productive power. I found this really counterintuitive. Usually we think of power as stopping things, repressing, saying no.
Foucault says that is the old view. The juridical view, modern power is productive. It says yes.
Yeah.
It produces identities. It creates the delinquent. It creates the good student. It creates the homosexual. By categorizing and observing people, power molds us into subjects. We internalize the gaze.
The panopticon.
The panopticon. This is Jeremy Bentham's design for a prison where the guard can see everyone from a central tower, but the prisoners can't see the guard. Because you might be watched at any moment, you police yourself. You behave. You become your own guard.
So under Foucault's view, is there any escape? If power is everywhere, even in my own self-discipline, is resistance just futile?
Not futile. In fact, Foucault famously said, where there is power, there is resistance. Resistance is actually part of the power relation. You can't have power without it. They define each other.
Right.
But you can't step outside of power. You can only negotiate your position within the web. There is no outside where you can stand and be perfectly free.
That is a lot to process. It's heavy. But I want to take this grand theory, this 30,000-foot view, and bring it crashing down to earth. I want to talk about what happens between two regular people. When I ask for a raise. When I'm fighting with a partner about who does the dishes. Segment 4. The mechanics of dependency.
Moving from the abstract to the interpersonal. This is where the rubber really meets the road.
Yes, because the sources included this theory by Richard Emerson called power dependence theory. And honestly, this felt like relationship advice disguised as sociology.
It really is. Emerson boils power down to a simple mathematical equation. The power of A over B is equal to the dependence of B on A.
Translation, I only have power over you if you need something I have.
Correct. Power isn't a personality trait. It's not about having a strong personality or alpha energy. It is purely structural. If I have a resource, money, affection, information, and you want it, I have power. If you don't want it, I have zero power.
And the sources break this down into two variables.
Two things determine dependence. First, motivational investment. How much do you want what I have? If I'm offering a ham sandwich and you're starting, I have huge power. If you just ate a Thanksgiving feast, I have absolutely no power. The resource hasn't changed, but your need has.
And the second variable.
Availability of alternatives. Can you get this resource somewhere else? If I'm the only person selling water in the desert, I have total power. If there are 10 vendors, my power drops to 0 because you can just walk to the next guy.
This is where it gets really practical. The text lists balancing operations. If I am in a relationship with a boss or partner and I am the weaker one, the power is unbalanced. I am dependent. How do I actually fix it?
Emerson lists 4 specific moves you can make, and they are fascinatingly strategic.
Okay, move number 1, withdrawal.
This attacks the first variable, motivational investment. You decide you just don't want the resource anymore. Your boss threatens to fire you. You say, I don't care about this job. I'm going to go live in a van and surf. Boom, his power is gone. You reduced your need.
The Zen approach, just stop wanting things. It's effective, but maybe hard to do if you have a mortgage and kids.
True. It's the ascetic strategy. By needing less, you become much harder to control.
Okay, move number 2, network extension.
This attacks the second variable, alternatives. You find new suppliers. If your partner is the only source of emotional support in your life, they have huge power over you. So you go out, make new friends, join a club. Now you have alternative sources of affection. Their monopoly is broken, and their power over you decreases.
That is literally what a therapist would tell you to do. Build a support network. It's just sociology applied to your feelings.
Exactly. The more options you have, the less power anyone has over you. This applies to job hunting too. The absolute best time to get a raise is when you have another offer in hand.
Okay, move number 3, coalition formation.
This is collective action. If you are one worker, the boss has power because he can easily replace you. If you form a union, you change the math entirely. You are pooling your resources to become a monopoly on labor. You are balancing the scales by ganging up.
United we bargain, divided we beg.
Precisely. It turns many weak Bs into one strong A.
And finally, move number 4. This one was a little weird to me. Status giving.
This is the psychological one. If you can't leave, which is withdrawal, and you can't find alternatives, which is extension, and you can't fight, which is coalition you pay, You give the powerful person status. You flatter them. You explicitly recognize their superiority.
Why does that help? Doesn't that just make them more powerful?
It seems that way, but it actually balances the exchange. Now they're getting something from you, status and ego, that they
Hmm.
depend on. You make them dependent on your praise. They need you to be the fan so they can be the star.
So being a sycophant is actually a power balancing strategy.
In a highly dysfunctional way, yes. You create a loop where they desperately need you to tell them how great they are. If you stop clapping, they lose their resource.
That explains so much about corporate middle management. It's just a survival strategy. Now, keeping with the interpersonal, we also have French and Raven's bases of power. This is like a toolkit of what you can use to generate that dependence.
Right. They identified 5 bases. Reward power, I can give you a bonus. Coercive power, I can fire you or hit you. Legitimate power, I have the badge, the title, the recognized right to command.
And then the knowledge ones.
Yes. Expert power, I know how to fix the computer and you don't. And referent power, you like me. You want to be like me.
And the sources made a really important point about the costs of these, because they aren't all equal in practice.
No. Coercion is extremely expensive. If I have to threaten you, I have to constantly watch you. I need surveillance. If I turn my back, you'll stop working because you hate me. It creates massive resistance. It's high maintenance. You can't run a company or a country solely on coercion forever.
But referent power.
That is the gold standard. If you identify with me, if you genuinely admire me, I don't need to watch you. You will do what I want because you actively want to please me. It requires zero surveillance. That is why charismatic leaders are so much more effective than tyrants who rely solely on brute force.
It's the difference between a cult leader and a prison warden. One is loved, one is feared.
And the loved one has far more sustainable power.
So we have looked at the mind with Luke's, the elite with Mills, and the relationship with Emerson. Now let's zoom all the way out. Segment 5, power on the world stage, international relations.
The macro level. And surprisingly, the logic of alternatives and survival we just discussed applies perfectly to nations with standing armies.
The starting point here is anarchy, and we don't mean chaos in the streets.
No, in IR theory, anarchy just means there is no world government. In a domestic society, if someone steals your car, you call the police. There is a higher authority. In international relations, there is no 9/11. The UN exists, but it can't really enforce laws on a superpower. If Russia or the US wants to do something, who physically stops them?
Nobody, so it's the Wild West.
Exactly. Which means the ultimate goal of every single state is just survival. You have to look out for yourself because nobody else will.
And this creates the security dilemma. This is a classic concept in the literature. Let's say I'm a nation. I want to be safe, so I build a wall and buy some tanks. Just for defense. I have no intention of attacking you. But you, my neighbor, look over the fence and see those tanks. You get nervous.
I don't know your intentions. I can't read your mind.
Yeah.
You say they are for defense, but maybe you're planning to invade. I can't take the risk, so I build bigger tanks.
Now I look at your bigger tanks, and I get nervous, so I build missiles.
And we end up in a massive arms race, even though neither of us wanted a war. We just wanted to be safe. The attempt to increase my security inherently decrease yours. That is the tragedy of the system. It's a structural trap.
So how do states manage this? The text talks about the balance of power.
Well, just like in Emerson's theory, you can balance. Internal balancing means you build up your own economy and army. You make yourself strong. External balancing means you form alliances. If there is a hegemon, a really big, scary dominant power, the smaller states band together to check it.
Like NATO forming to check the Soviet Union.
Exactly. My enemy's enemy is my friend. It's coalition formation from Emerson's theory, just on a global scale.
But there is an alternative, right? Bandwagoning.
Yes. Sometimes, instead of fighting the bully, you join him. You align with a threatening power in hopes of protection or maybe getting a share of the spoils. It's a very risky strategy, feeding the crocodile hoping he eats you last, but sometimes basic survival dictates it.
The sources also talk about polarity. This describes the geometry of power in the world.
Right. Multipolar is like 19th century Europe. 5 or 6 great powers,
Right.
Britain, France, Russia, Prussia, Austria. Flexible alliances, shifting partners. It's a very complex dance. Bipolar is the Cold War. 2 superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union. Rigid alliances. A zero-sum game, you pick a side. And unipolar is the post-Cold War era. The US as the sole superpower.
And the debate is which is most stable.
That is the million-dollar question. Some realists argue bipolarity is most stable because it's simple. You know exactly who the enemy is. You can calculate the risks. Multipolarity is messy. Too many variables, too many miscalculations, leading to massive conflicts like World War I.
But then we have the nuclear paradox, because all these theories about tanks and armies, they kind of break when you introduce the bomb.
This changed the definition of power completely. Before 1945, power was the ability to win a war. With nuclear weapons, power became the ability to deter a war.
A balance of terror.
Exactly. If we both have nukes, we can both completely destroy each other. Mutual assured destruction. So military power became less about use and more about threat. It goes back to that idea of potentiality we started with. The weapon is most powerful when it sits in the silo, unused. If you have to actually use it, you failed because everyone is dead.
It's incredible how these themes recur over and over. Potentiality, dependency, structure, whether it's a marriage or a nuclear standoff. So let's bring this home, the outro. What does this all actually mean?
If we synthesize all this, from the careless smoker to the nuclear silo, we see a very clear pattern. Power is not a magic wand. It is about the management of dependency and the control of alternatives.
Whether it's the power elite setting the national agenda or a husband making his wife dependent on his income, the mechanics are literally the same.
They are. It is all about narrowing the choices of others. Phase 1, I beat you in a choice. Phase 2, I limit what choices you can even discuss. Phase 3, I limit what choices you can even imagine.
That is the big so what for you listening today. Why does this matter? Because if you don't understand these phases, you are flying blind. You might be looking for a gun to your head, overt coercion, but you are completely missing the fact that your deepest desires are being shaped by an algorithm.
Exactly. Recognizing the three faces allows you to see the invisible cage. It allows you to ask, am I doing this because I want to? Or because the agenda was set before you even walked into the room?
And I want to leave everyone with a final provocative thought from the sources. We talked about Foucault and the idea that resistance defines power. If Foucault is right, and power produces our very reality, our identities, our truths, is it ever possible to truly step outside of power relations? Or is the attempt to escape power just another form of power play?
That is the ultimate question. If you say, I resist, are you breaking the system? Or are you just perfectly playing the role the system assigned to you, the rebel?
Something to mull over the next time you think you're making a totally free choice.
Indeed.
So look at your next interaction with your boss, your spouse, or just reading the news headlines and ask yourself, who has the alternatives here? And who is setting the agenda?
And remember, if you can't see the conflict, that doesn't mean power isn't at work. It might just mean it's winning.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.